Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about color perception. The world is so colorful, and an interesting question to ask is how our mind perceives different colors. As we've discussed in the previous lecture, we saw that light is an electromagnetic radiation. There's both electric and magnetic waves in it. And we also said that there is a broad spectrum of waves with electromagnetic properties, but there is only a part of it that is visible. We call that visible light or white light. And but this visible light itself is comprised of several different wavelengths in it, specific to different colors that we experience. Now, this is called prism effect. Now, the idea of color perception came primarily from the work of Thomas Young's. He worked on what is called as a reverse prism effect. Just like white light can break down into its individual colors, what he did is he did the reverse. He tried to create different colors by only working on three primary colors, and those are green, red, and blue. What he figured out was that by combining green and red, he would get yellow. And by combining all these three, he would get white. Now, this idea of mixing colors based only on three primary colors and creating all possible colors eventually led to proposal of first color perception theory, and we'll talk about that later. Before that, let's first talk about what color mixing is, and especially talk about two different types of color mixing. So there are two different ways of mixing colors. One is through additive mixing. In additive mixing, there are two colors, and when you superimpose these two colors, the resulting new color will have more of light or more of wavelength when compared to both individual colors. So the new color has more light. And the reverse prism effect demonstrated by Thomas Young, is actually based on this idea of additive coloring. So that green and red would lead to more color additive mixing, resulting in the yellow color. The opposite, another way of mixing colors is subtractive color. In subtractive color mixing, you still add two colors to get a new color, but the resulting new color has less amount of light when compared to its individual colors. So the new color has less light when compared to the combined individual colors. There are two important theories to talk about when it comes to color perception. One is the trichromatic theory, and the other one is opponent processing theory. The first theory of color perception, which is also called trichromatic theory, was proposed by Helmholtz. And his idea of color perception is based off of Thomas Young's idea of reverse prism effect. The idea was to create different colors from three basic colors. But because these two individuals contributed to this theory, the trichromatic theory is often referred to as the Young-Helmholtz trichromatic theory. Helmholtz is a person who developed this theory based off of Young's work on reverse prism effect. Now, according to this theory, it is based on the idea that we have three kinds of photoreceptors. One type is sensitive to green light, the other one to the red, and still other to the blue. So we have three types of photoreceptors sensitive to three different wavelengths of light. And our experience of color then is how these three different receptors fire. If these two receptors fire together, you experience red. If this alone receptor fires, then you experience the green. So according to trichromatic theory, the photoreceptors, which are sensitive to three different types of wavelengths, determine the color that we perceive. And this is based on three primary colors. So the three photoreceptors are sensitive to three primary colors, namely red, green, and blue. But what about yellow then? Yellow then, according to this theory, would be reddish green. There is no specific receptor for yellow. It's when these two red and green receptors fire together, that's when we experience yellow. This sounds odd though, but we'll talk about another theory that was proposed, and that's called opponent processes or opponent processing theory. This theory was proposed by Herring. And Herring was interested in after images. Now, an after image is, I'll show you a screen. I will show you a color, an image. I want you to pay attention to it, stare at that image, and see what happens. Are you ready? What do you see? Okay. Well, when you stare at an object with a specific color and then you close your eyes, you probably see a different color. And that different color is called after image. When you look at red, you probably will see green. When you look at yellow, you probably see blue, and so on and so forth. Based on his interest or work on after images, what Herring did is he proposed the operant processing theory. Now, according to this theory, there are still three photoreceptors according to this theory. Now, these three photoreceptors are not sensitive to just red, green, or blue. Instead, according to Herring, what he proposed was that these are sensitive to three different pairs of colors. So, one photoreceptor type is sensitive to blue, yellow, another one to green, red, and yet another one to the black and white. So these three receptors are each receptor is sensitive to two opposing or two pairs of colors. So for example, if you take blue yellow, this particular photoreceptor is sensitive to blue or yellow and two opposite ones. And at any given point of time, a photoreceptor is either firing to give blue or yellow. In other words, it either responds to blue or yellow, but not both colors at the same time. And when it comes to green red, the receptor either fires to a green or red, but not both. Similarly, white or black, but not both. And so each receptor can only carry one signal. In other words, it can be active in terms of carrying only one or the other color, but not both. And more specifically, what Herring proposed was that each receptor carries two opposing signals. In other words, one process is active when the other one is blocked. In other words, if a receptor is active in terms of red, then it is inactive in terms of green. In other words, if another example would be if this receptor is active in terms of blue, then it's inactive in terms of yellow. So an after image is formed when one opposing process is so activated that it automatically initiates an opposing process. So if you keep staring at blue for a while, and you close your eyes and look at the blank screen, the opposing process kicks in and you'll see yellow, or vice versa. And if you keep looking at green, then the green is so active, like it almost gets adapted. And then when you close your eyes and look at the blank screen, then the opposing process kicks in. Now, when you look at this, then you still have three types of receptors, but each one, instead of being sensitive with just one color, is sensitive to two pairs of colors, according to this theory. So then our color perception is a result of, so these blue, yellow, green, red are the actual ones that give us the color, and the blue, the black and white, these detect mostly the brightness, shades, and give us the black and white image or information about the object you're trying to perceive. Now let's look at this one. I'm going to show you an image. I want you to stare at it as long as you can, and then keep staring it, and I'll see what happens. Okay, are you ready? Look at the center. Keep staring at the dot here. Right. Okay, what did you see? Well, you're supposed to see an American flag, but the original flag that we saw was in different color. The after image of green is red, so you saw red here. After image of black is white, so you saw white here. The after image of yellow is blue, so you saw blue here and white here. That's an example of after image. And so we looked at two different theories: trichromatic theory and opponent processes theory. And these three theories are similar in the sense that they argue that there are three different kinds or receptors, while trichromatic theory assumes that these three receptors are sensitive to the three different colors, red, green, and blue, while trichromatic theory is based on additive mixing. Opponent processes theory is primarily based on after images. Now, before we end this topic, quickly want to talk about color blindness. As you know, color blindness is when a person can't distinguish or experience or perceive different colors in the world. And this is again based on these three primary receptors, the photoreceptors for red, green, and blue. A trichromat is a person who has normal color vision, receptors of all the three kinds. In terms of opponent process theory, you can say it has a person who has red, green, blue, yellow, and black, white receptors. They're all the three receptors, they're trichromats, normal vision. A monochromat is a person with no color vision. Monochromat has only one receptor type, specifically the black and white type, not the green and red or a blue and yellow type. So this person sees the entire world in shades of gray. The more common kind or type of color blindness is dichromat, where the individual has black and white receptor and one of the two receptors, red green or yellow blue, but not both. And a most common of these two types of color blindness, which is dichromats, is a red green one. And very rarely will you find a dichromat with blue yellow color blindness. So to sum up, we looked at color perception. We also talked about two theories of color perception. Now the question is, which of these two theories is accurate? Now, the current view is that both are accurate and both these theories actually explain how we perceive color. But the level at which they describe how we perceive color is different. Most of the current researchers assume that, believe that the photoreceptor level, the trichromatic theory, better explains color perception at the photoreceptor level. And the opponent process theory, on the other hand, better explains human perception or color perception at levels beyond the photoreceptors level. So it can be on the bipolar cell level or the ganglionic cell level or the visual cortex. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. In the next video, we'll look at perception in general.